Authentication is not exciting. Nobody loves managing passwords, and password managers are a workaround for a fundamentally flawed system. People lose their passwords, they write them down, they have too many to remember, and beyond that, authentication gets in the way when you're trying to accomplish something. It's often one of the most frustrating parts of using an app. It's not an exciting topic, but what is an exciting topic is people trying to make authentication seamless. And this is exactly what Quentin is trying to do for Matrix with Matrix Authentication Service, or MAS for short. You're watching Matrix Live, and today we will have a look at what is new in MAS, what this means for people deploying Matrix servers, and what this means for client and server developers. Quentin, welcome. You're a senior software engineer at Element, and you're working on MAS?
Hello, Jibo. Yeah, that's right. So I've been working for Element for the past 3 or 4 years now, and my main project has indeed been like rethinking authentication in Matrix from the ground up, and that goes through MAS, and I guess we'll dive into that today.
Yeah, so actually, let's dive in right now and be very concrete. Can you show us a demo of what MAS does?
Sure. So around like a year ago, we started using that internally in production for Element employees. So I'm gonna actually show my work account, hopefully not leaking anyone's secrets. Okay, so the first feature I want to show with this new authentication stack is the login with QR code. So the idea here is that I have my existing regular Elements web client, nothing fancy about it. But one option I now have is that here, if I go to my dropdown here, I can link a new device. And I'll do the same on my iPhone. So if I click sign in with QR code, I can then scan this QR code. After some time, it will prompt me to just enter a 2-digit code just to make sure we're talking to the right device and we have a secure connection between the two. And if I continue, I'm granted with this screen that's saying, hey, you're about to grant access to Element X on this iPhone. This is what kind of access you're going to allow. And I have some information about the client, like its privacy policy of it or its terms of services. I'm all right with that, so I click continue. After some time, it should, hopefully, yes. Now I'm just logged in Element X, and after some sync time, I'm just in my work account, and that's it. I'm logged in, and the session I have is completely verified, so I'm not sure where I can show that. Well, you see that the chat backup is enabled. So what happened here is that, like, with one code scan, I got both. The login happened, and my device was verified at the same time. So it's like a one-step scan a code, wait a bit, and you're in.
So you have shown QR code authentication, and it really reminds me of what some other messengers do using QR code to authenticate. But here, I think one key difference is when you authenticate on your phone using the QR code, it's completely independent. Like, you have two completely different sessions. They are not linked together. You don't need to have one device online for the other to be able to read messages from it. Is it correct?
Yeah, so that's not like just device linking as you're used to with the messages. This is really a new Matrix session. I just logged in, but the thing is, I didn't have to enter any credentials on my phone directly because I was already logged in on my computer. So I was able to just not exactly transfer the session, but like create a new session from scratch because I authorized it from my laptop.
Right, you are able to say, yeah, that's me. You can log in on that session. So is it correct then to describe it as a sort of built-in SSO provider or identity provider that could also be chained with an existing SSO like Keycloak, or is it more complex than that?
So the piece of software you saw, like the screen that was prompting me whether I wanted to allow access to my account or not, is a screen that is provided by MAS, so Matrix Authentication Service. You can think of MAS as indeed it does have some single sign-on functionality, like if I'm logging in from multiple clients from on the same device, I'm gonna have to log in once, and then the other sessions will already have somewhat the credentials that the session already on. So that's part of it, but I prefer to think about Matrix Authentication Service more of a rewrite, a complete rewrite from the ground up of the authentication system we had in Synapse. So Synapse, the main home, the major home server that most people use nowadays, and it's not. It's really about replacing the whole logic we had in Synapse. It's part of, you could see it as the part of rewriting Synapse, some part of Synapse in Rust, because Matrix Authentication Service is in Rust, and rethinking it with like a modern approach and only focusing on authentication.
So if it goes beyond just being an identity provider, because I believe it's more integrated into Matrix itself, in the various APIs that Matrix relies on to properly function, it would have been impossible to use an existing open source identity provider like Keycloak as the base for making Matrix more OpenID Connect native. So 3 years later, after having started the effort, do you think it would have made sense to fork an open source identity provider instead of writing MAS from scratch?
So that's an interesting question, because I think the goal of MAS never was to provide a fully featured identity provider solution. Like Keycloak has its use. You can connect it to, I don't know, an existing LDAP, to other identity provider, manage Kerberos sessions, and all the fancy stuff like that. Manage many users, many groups, role-based access control. That's not the point of MAS. We're trying to here only to replicate the existing features we had in Synapse in terms of user management, and have like a user experience that is really tailored to Matrix, because we have some concepts in Matrix that are specific to Matrix, and if we want to make the user experience great, there's almost no point basing a solution on another off-the-shelf product. We could have done that. We could have implemented part of the spec change we're proposing based on existing products, but because of the set of constraints we have, like we need to import existing deployments, like migrate existing deployments, including existing users, existing sessions, also know about what Matrix device is. And most importantly, we wanted it to be as light as possible, because we know people are running Synapse on small Raspberry Pis. We couldn't manage to, we couldn't ask them to, hey, let's run this 2 gig JVM based software for just managing your users. So compared to Keycloak, our needs are very little and also very specific. So that's why we chose to do a new product from the ground up.
Right. So MAS is using OpenID Connect behind the scenes, but it provides much more than regular OpenID Connect. Like one of the things you didn't show, but I am aware of, is the session management, because you have a central place where you can manage what are the devices connected to your account. You can revoke them, etc. So indeed, it's you have a lot of business logic that you can't really export in a Keycloak or another open source solution.
Well, I think one it's probably interesting to step back a bit and understand why we did this change in the first place. Why we went to like recreate a new off system from the ground up. There are many reasons for that. I'll probably like we'll talk about the Matrix count. I have a talk. I'll explain that in details. But when Matrix was created, when the first spec was drafted, it needed some authentication system, And the Matrix team at that time probably thought it was the right thing to think of an authentication system, a custom authentication system from the ground up that is tailored to Matrix. Um, it had its own benefits, but like it also had and still has many flaws. And I think one of the major, probably the most important flaws it has in terms of design is that we insisted when designing it to have all the authentication steps show natively within the client. So like if you go to Element Web, log into matrix.org, you will have a username and password field that is within Element Web directly. It's an interesting thing because as a client developer, that means you can have an authentication experience that is that seems very seamless, but it has its list of drawbacks. One of, I guess, the main one is that if you're using any kind of domain bound credential, for example, I want to log in with my Matrix account using a YubiKey, a WebAuthn credential. All those credentials are bound to the domain where I'm signing in. So my client is usually not on the same domain name as my home server. Those are two separate things. So we've taught our users to enter the credentials for a service, but on a different domain, on a different website than the service itself. And it's even a problem with password managers, because right now, if I'm registering an account on Element Web on Matrix.org, my password manager will tell me, okay, I can save your password. I'm gonna save it for app.element.io, even though I just created an account for Matrix.org. So next time I'm trying another client, I'm trying FluffyChat, I go to fluffychat.im, and then I'm just surprised that my password manager doesn't know about this password because the domain don't match. So that's probably the major shift here, is that instead of entering your credentials in your client, we're entering your credentials and managing authentication in on a domain name on a website that is specific to your home server, specific to the service, which makes a lot more sense. And this is why we started this journey from the beginning.
All right, so we're going to talk about the implications for the developers of clients and of servers, but first, let's consider the perspective of someone who is deploying the service. You mentioned earlier somebody who could deploy, for example, Synapse on a Raspberry Pi. So for people eager to try sliding sync early, there was a sliding sync proxy separate from Synapse. Now there is MAS in addition to that. So Synapse is going to receive native sliding sync support eventually. But what about MAS? Is it going to be a standalone component that is going to be integrated into Synapse eventually, or is it going to be standalone forever?
So for now, it's standalone because we really wanted to start from a blank slate. And also, there was this goal, and there's still this goal of maybe using part of that code with other home servers. I have this personal goal of like also using MAS in Dendrite, for example, whenever everything is mature enough. But I know we definitely know that like having this separate service is an extra burden, and it's also hard to install right now, even though the documentation really greatly improved the past few months. So the goal long term is indeed to have it really integrated within Synapse. So instead of we're not going to rewrite everything. We're not going to rewrite MAS in Synapse, the functionality we have. Instead, what we're going to do, and that's one of the reasons we chose Rust in the beginning, is that Rust has this somewhat superpower of being able to interrupt quite easily, somewhat easily with big quotes, in other languages. And so in Synapse, we already have some parts of Synapse that is written in Rust. And so we have the same goal here of embedding the full mass within Synapse directly. So hopefully one day, for your home server, the upgrades to actually use mass will be as simple as just the next Synapse version, and everything is handled for you. We still have a very, very long way to go, because we really want to make that right. And also, as I was saying, this is a rewrite from the ground up, so it's a breaking change for sure.
So in the meantime, if MAS is going to be a standalone component for a little while, I guess there will be a transition period between regular sync, current sync, I would say, and MAS-based authentication for Matrix. In the meantime, are you going to, so when I say you, I mean Element, is Element going to ship containers of Synapse with MAS built in for the sake of easy deployments?
That might be part of the journey to go there. We haven't exactly planned that yet. We're focusing right now on, well, getting feature parity in mass. So everything that was supported in Synapse, we want to have some level of support in mass to cover most of the use cases. We're also focusing on like just making the documentation good, so that people understand about it, are able to deploy it themselves. We know we have that in the long-term goal, but it's not yet clear like what the timeline is exactly in terms of when we're gonna ship just a simple container that like manages part of the transition for you or not. We're I think one of the major thing we have to work on before is all the tooling around migration. We have this goal of eventually migrating Matrix.org to MAS, and Matrix.org is like millions and millions of users. We have to migrate them, and the current tooling is really needs more work to be stable and to be ready for that kind of scale. So we have a lot of work to do before thinking about actually just shipping it by default, I guess.
All right, I really appreciate the attention to detail, because it looks like a very nice and polished product from the end user perspective already. And I really appreciate that you are working on the documentation and paying attention to the migration tool and to people who are going to do the dirty work of the migration when you have an existing instance and you need to migrate it to the new software. It's going to be key for the adoption. So kudos for that. But there is another population that is going to be impacted by this shift, and it's developers. So does it mean that developers who currently implement the regular login in their apps, in native apps potentially, will they have to entirely rewrite how they support authentication to support MAS?
That's an interesting question, and it also looks back probably on the reason why we chose to write custom software instead of basing on something else. So we already established earlier that we think that authenticating through the browser is the right thing to do. Authenticating through redirecting to a domain name that is controlled by the service and not in the client is the right thing to do. We already have something like that in Matrix. That's called m.login.sso. So that's the legacy way, the current way, I guess, of doing any kind of SSO logins. So if you're creating, for example, right now, an account on matrix.org based on your GitHub account, for example, that's using this primitive to do it. But the problem we saw about this is that m.login and that SSO is really a bad version of 2. So it has the same principle, but it doesn't have all the security benefits that grew out of 2 with time, I guess. So that's the other major shift with MAS, is that not only we want people to log in through their browser instead of logging in directly in the client, but also we want to use a modern protocol to do that. But still, we didn't want to break existing clients.
Right.
Even within Element, we currently have, what, 5 clients, 6 clients that we maintain. It would have been impossible to just say, okay, just rewrite the way you log in, and we expected everyone to go with it. So it's actually a nice thing that we have this existing m.login.sso, because it's a login method that is quite common, that because it's available on Matrix.org, we have many clients supporting this. So that's the thing we did in MAS, is that instead of just providing the new shiny OAuth2/OIDC based APIs, we're also providing a compatibility layer that lets you log in with any client that is that can use m.login.sso. The long-term goal is still indeed to move everyone to modern OAuth2 and OIDC, but still, the day we're switching to MAS, all the existing clients that support m.login.sso in a good enough way should just work. There are other implications, though, with this change, is that we're not just moving the login to a web page that is controlled by the home server. We're also trying to move everything related to your accounts, because right now, if I log in on Element Web with my username and password credentials, Element Web technically has the power of deactivating my account. There's a button in there to let me deactivate my account, which is fine if I can trust my client and my client isn't is the client I'm expected to use. But everyone gets phished. Can get phished. That's not that's a risk. So part of the thinking here is that there's no real reason for the client to be able to manage your account directly. There's no reason for your client to be able to change your password, for example, or add another email address to recover your accounts. So we've had this. We're also moving everything that is related to manage your own account to a separate web interface that is really specific to your home server. So that's probably the other change that the clients must do if they want to have a good user experience, is that with MAS, the home server will advertise a URL that you can redirect your user to do those actions. So in the settings, I can show you actually, if I just share my screen very quick. So if I look at my account here in the general section, I can click manage my account here. So instead of being able to add email addresses here or change other account related infos, I have a deep link here that lets me manage the other sessions, sign out of existing sessions, add new emails and stuff like that. So that's probably the other major change that a client is supposed to do, is if you want to provide a good user experience there, you probably want to have those deep links figured out.
All right. So you said earlier you're going to give a talk at the Matrix conference in Berlin on September 21 for your talk, among several representatives of the public sector and the ecosystem at large. We are going to keep this Matrix Live relatively short in order not to spoil the talk. Can you tease the talk a bit? What can we expect from it?
I think the talk will. The goal of this presentation for me was to give a concise, a really in-depth overview, like, of everything that has been happening with MAS and OIDC in Matrix and stuff like that. So I feel like we've only scratched the surface here. There's lots of stuff to talk about, like all the MSCs that we have in flight around this proposal. Also, everything that Musk can do, currently do, and can't do today. What needs to be done? What we want to have in it. Also, what we don't want to have in it. And also, I expect this conference to be a really good way for us to get together and um, to talk to client developers, to home server administrators, to understand what they expect from us. If also to see if we can help them, help the client developers add support to it in their existing clients and stuff. We still have a few gray areas in the spec and GMSCs where we don't know what we want to enforce, what we want to make optional. We have the general direction. We have the core MSCs and the core protocol figured out, but still, it's still open to this discussion. It's not the position of Element to like just impose this change and without talking to anyone. So I guess that's the main thing I'm aiming with this talk.
And to be completely transparent, it's not just Element trying to push Matrix Authentication Service. This is heavily discussed with the spec core team, and the vast majority of the spec core team, if not the entirety of the spec core team, is actively pushing for the adoption of MAS. All right. Is there anything else we forgot to cover?
I could spend hours. You probably figured out for now. I could spend hours just talking about that. I'm just excited by the future. Like I've been working on this for a really long time at this point. I've also experienced a lot of like community pushback from the beginning, but at the beginning because it was really not clear what this product was, because there was a lot of confusion. Okay, are we making Matrix centralized now with ask everyone to log in with Google? That's one thing that people thought it was at the beginning. So I'm really optimistic nowadays because we've had recent discussions in various like community rooms, and people seem to be more enthusiastic nowadays. They seem to understand more what MAS is, what all this work is. So it's getting really more pleasant to work with everyone, and people start to see what kind of problem we're solving here, and what kind of future as well we're paving the road for. I haven't talked about, for example, this leads the way. This opens the way to potentially having restricted access to your clients, so we can start thinking about Matrix for a protocol for something else than a full-featured chat client. Maybe just a note-taking app that can only access one subset of room and not all your messages. That's something that wasn't possible before, and even though we haven't explored yet exactly how it would look like, it really opens up new possibilities for the protocol for the future, and I'm really excited to see what people are going to do with it.
Okay, very cool. So if people want to talk more about Matrix Authentication Service, they will be able to find you in the Matrix room of MAS. There is a Matrix room where they can talk about it with you. Ideally, they can see you at the conference as well. You have a talk on the 21st of September. And on that note, I think we are sold out for the Matrix conference. We sold all the public tickets, so I'm going to try to quibble to get more tickets and see if we can add a few more. But unfortunately, we are sold out. Or fortunately, we are sold out. If we have covered everything and the rest is for the conference, I'll see you around and see you next week, Matrix Live.
Bye.